And here we are, welcome with the Halloween version of our webinar. As most of you have probably seen, there's a chat over on the side where you can click and chat to all the others. And as always, we would love to know where you're joining us from. So say hi in the chat, let us know where you're joining us from. There's also a Q&A button on the side, and that will allow you to ask your questions and upvote the questions of others. Because at the end of the webinar, we will probably do them in order, although we may switch things around. And down here is a green button that will get you some resources. We will change it a few times during the webinar to make sure that you can click on all the right things. And with that, we've done all the housekeeping for today. So make sure you're ready. And I think it is time to introduce today's experts. But first, I will wish you a happy, or should I say, spooky Halloween. My name is Taco Verdonschot, and I will be your host today. Because what better day than Halloween to talk about the web and spiders and crawling, right? But before we dive into this month's news, let me introduce our two experts for today. First, please meet Carolyn, the Queen of Ladonia news SEO expert and principal SEO at Yoast. She left a world filled with fairy tales and magic to join Yoast, and now she's working her magic on all Yoast products. But don't worry, she promised not to use any black magic. And next, please meet Alex. Alex started in SEO when it was just 10 blue links and keyword spamming was the most efficient way to rank a site. Fortunately, both Google and Alex have evolved since. So while Google turned into the biggest search engine out there, Alex kept learning everything about SEO through his own agency. And today, Alex's expertise is put to good use to improve Yoast.com and the whole Yoast suite of products. And just like Carolyn, he doesn't do black hat SEO. Well, usually. So please put your virtual hands together for Alex and Carolyn.
Yay! Yes. All right, everyone. Welcome to the October 31st edition of Yoast SEO News. I am Carolyn. He is Alex, and we are going to get started here as soon as I can see the screen. There we go. There are lovely cartoons. What are we going to discuss today? We are going to be talking about SEO news, obviously, AI news, because there's been quite a bit this last month, WordPress news, and then, of course, we will have the Q&A. Alex, are you ready?
I am. My lamp just turned off randomly. That was actually just happened. Had to turn it back on. You know, it's just the spooky
I'm still petrified because I actually have candles on my bookcase behind me, and I'm positive that the bookcase is going to catch fire while I'm talking.
Fine. There's lots of people in the chat. They'll warn you if the fire spreads very quickly.
If you guys see flames behind me, please let me know. Thank you.
It's not a filter.
All right. As always, there will be a recording available after this. So if you're worried that you might have missed something or you'd like to share it with someone else, those will be available. Let us go. All right. Oh, feel free to ask questions. Almost forgot to mention that. I think Taco said, but questions are always welcome and we'll be happy to answer them. All right. And if you'd like to learn more about today's topics, the URL that you can use is Yoast, like yoa.st/webinar-OCT2023. Obviously, that is Yoast Webinar October 2023. Feel free to share with your friends. When you registered, I don't know if you remember this, but we asked you if there were any questions that you were looking to have answered. A lot of you replied. A lot of your questions are not things that we're going to be able to answer in the news webinar. However, we do have a How to Start with SEO webinar that we run pretty regularly. The next one is November 21st. If you have a question that involves how to research keywords, how to set up Yoast, anything that's like SEO 101, you're going to want to catch the How to Start with SEO webinar. It is available. You can register now. It's November 21st is the next one. So hopefully we will see you there. And finally, I'm reading a lot of commercials. If you have questions that are not answered in the Learn SEO webinar, we also do have the Yoast Academy, and all of you with premium subscriptions have full access to the Yoast Academy. There are a ton of courses in there that can help you find the information that you're looking for. Okay, now we can start with the SEO news.
Finally.
Finally, the first item we have, this came from Mark Gurman at Bloomberg. Apple is apparently considering building its own search engine. Alex, I have often wondered why they have not yet done this, but I understand that there are reasons. Have you heard anything about this?
Not too much actually, but I'm a Google and Android user, so as such, I probably, even when it comes to tech, read stuff that isn't to do with Apple. So when we were bantering it around the office, this is the first I heard about it. But I was also surprised that they didn't really create a search engine. Is it because the monopoly is too big, or is now the right time to start pouncing on it, especially with AI coming in?
Well, from what I understand, there's a couple reasons why Apple hasn't done this yet. Number one, Google is doing excellent work, and there's no reason really to rebuild the wheel. The other thing is financial. Google is paying Apple a lot of money to keep Google accessible and default on Apple devices. So, you know, $8 billion, how much? I think the next slide shows how much money they've made.
It does.
Between $18 to $20 billion a year to remain on the iPhones. Like that's not sofa change. That's some serious money. And I would imagine, you know, it's a big undertaking. It's a big investment to run your own search engine. So if you're already making $20 billion a year by simply including Google, why not continue to include Google? I think if there became a point where there was a technological reason or maybe a privacy reason, or actually privacy would probably be the biggest thing. If Google stopped sharing some of the data with Apple and Apple needed to get the data or wanted to use data that it collects within its own ecosystem, that might change the math a little bit. But for right now, I'm not Apple, obviously, but I think I would have a hard time walking away from any number that ended in billion.
Yeah, I mean, although there must be meetings, right, where they say, is it what would happen if they didn't pay us? What could we earn that? And if so, how could we earn it? Could we do it through search, through everything that they, you know, cooperate with Apple with? And as well as that, there's all the iPhone and everything, all the devices. You know, even though I'm Google by phone, I'm on a Mac right now. So what would happen with my search behavior? And I know that maybe Bing tried to do that at certain points and it didn't work, but it's a bit different maybe with Apple, because I don't think maybe they just create a search engine or a search experience in the same way. That maybe what they're thinking is what this next chapter of search is. Like, we're all wondering what it would be, and they're one of the innovators, right? So
it sounded like there was something, at least in the articles, it mentioned the search generative experience. So maybe now with AI, maybe Apple can have more of you don't even have to go to the search engine. You can just stay right here on your phone and keep all your data and your information and your searches, more importantly, within our clutches, so that we don't have to share these with Google. And that would accomplish a couple things. It would keep the data and the user information within Apple's closed environment. It would also deprive Google of revenue. So this feels like a very tenuous frenemy kind of situation between Google and Apple. And if it were to split, you know, what would that do to Google's market share? What would that do to Apple's market share? We'd have probably instantly a second search engine that we would have to optimize for. I mean, that would be a pretty seismic shift in the landscape.
It's interesting that they may be thinking about it more seriously now that they've made the VR product as well. So that goes more of a discovery experience in general. So so that's going to be interesting. But then do we as SEOs have to think about that differently for a different kind of search experience? But Google's going that way anyway, in the way that we may have to adapt our way of thinking to the technology that's surrounding us. So it's another interesting one. It'll be another one to think about, like a new social platform that someone has to get used to, even though they don't want to.
Well, I mean, just one last thing before we move on to the next topic. I think what's nice about, if you can say it's nice, about Google having such a monopoly on the search market right now, is that we really only have to optimize for Google. We don't have to worry about the other search engines, because even if we dominate in the results and the other search engines, they're not going to drive the same level of traffic that Google's driving. So it's a single thing to focus on. And if we suddenly ended up with two almost equal traffic drivers, now you absolutely have to think about, am I optimizing for Google or am I optimizing for Apple? And if I optimize for one, am I damaging the other? And how's that going to affect the traffic inputs? So I hope they figure it out. But
right. I'm just trying, while you were talking, I was just thinking, well, what would they do with all of this search experience? Because they could put it in all of their products. You're sending a message, then you think of shopping feeds, and then I was thinking about Amazon and the way that their relationship with Apple may change, because they may be able to get marketplace ads or placements or other form of data feed to power whatever that search engine is, which means that they may not require Google at that point. And the more that people are using their mobile devices means that essentially you could call Google a middleman at that point, couldn't you? That they're just there between what you're thinking and what you want at the end. And obviously they want to stop that, and Apple could facilitate that, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I think Apple users have a different, more intense relationship with their devices than Android users do. So
cool.
All right, well, we should probably move on.
Yes.
Let's talk about fluctuations in Google Discover traffic. Barry Schwartz had an interesting article at Search Engine Roundtable. Do you try to get a lot of Google Discovery traffic? I've had some real good luck with it.
Yeah, but fluctuations, right? And it's always hard to control because it's not scientific. It's in that way that you can't predict a pattern that something would happen. It has to go by something that's maybe even newsworthy, which you obviously can't predict unless you're a news publication and you need to work in that certain format, which you have more experience of. But it's interesting to see that fluctuation over time, and sites that may have also got hit with HCU will also find a related yet not directly related hit here, where discovery shouldn't be there for your site as well. So it's not just about what you're writing, but how you're writing it in order to let potential audience discover you. But the fact that Google have been making this more specific means that it'll have been abused in the past, right?
Yeah, and Discover traffic is one of those things that people. Do you remember when Dig was big? Yeah. Like people didn't know they wanted that fire hose of traffic that would come from being picked up or popping on Dig until they got it, and then it was addictive. So I know that people that have had a taste of that fire hose really want to keep going back to it, and anything that's going to make it less predictable or less something that you can optimize for is going to be frustrating, I think, for the people that have been actively trying to game and to work the Discover traffic.
It is interesting. I think as the algorithm gets more sophisticated as well, it'll know the kind of content and context and the ways in which things should be discovered. So even if you're say your news, but the context, even your personal context of why you might search for something may give you different results. That might even be interesting in discovery in terms of your own thoughts and opinions in a bad way, right? It might be a thing where
information bias, yeah,
deeper into an echo chamber, which is, a problem of social media at the moment and the way that their algorithms work.
That was always one of the things I argued with news publishers about. They wanted to customize the news that they were giving to the people that were landing on their homepage according to their likes and their interests. And part of reading the news and part of, being open to new things is being exposed to viewpoints and information that you might not otherwise be inclined to look at. So I can definitely see a potential for it to fall into just a giant confirmation bias loop.
I wonder if that means that there's people who want to have a preference of being in an echo chamber or people who don't want to be, and that may change the way in which you discover new content.
People like to be comfortable, and they're comfortable with being reaffirmed and reassured that they're right. So I think most people would fall into that. I would rather be comforted than challenged.
Definitely. But yeah, no, it's big changes, and I think there'll be another change to discover soon that will maybe refine what any of the experimentation and data that they've seen from this update as well.
We'll have to keep an eye on that. I'm sure Barry will keep an eye on it. He's very good about reporting on those things.
Yeah.
Barry also reported in search engine land about the impact of Google's September 2023 helpful content update. That helpful content has been interesting. I know a lot of people have gotten hit, and it's the subject of a lot of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, there's not been too many people who've come out and said that HCU just happened and I couldn't be happier. You don't hear a lot of that discussion. It's definitely not one where there've been loads of pros based on domains, and that the only pros is that someone else got penalized and you now take their place, right? That's the only way that someone's won, rather than their content has been, which might be confusing for some that may initially see an uptake. It might just mean that, yeah, you've not done something bad to your site, but that also means what happened to the competitor. And I might also think, well, maybe the competitor's going to wake up now because they've just noticed a big drop of traffic. So you've still got to keep whatever wits about you for the next update, which will happen, I reckon, in the next 6 months. But it seems to be one of the widest updates that's affected the widest amount of sites for some time.
I do wonder how they're fine-tuning the algorithm that's driving it, and the learning model that the machines are using to make those determinations about prioritizing the human-centric content over the search engine optimized content, or the written for the bots exclusively content. Ann Smarty posted something on X asking the Google people, why is this particular piece of content not ranking when it's 100% for users? These are this is one person's opinions and views, and it's a very well thought out article, and it's very in depth about this particular product. I think it was a gas grill, I don't remember exactly, versus this article over here, which is on a gas grill site, and this is clearly done just for ranking, and there's no useful content here. This is not good. And the Googler came back and said, well, this article that you wrote, while it's very good, there's no pages on your site at all that are optimized for gas grills. Like, okay, well, but you just said that you want us to write for people and you want to prioritize content that's helpful and useful. And now you're telling me that because it's not also optimized for the search engines, and that I didn't set up a page on my site just for gas grills, that I'm not going to outrank this clearly built just for the rankings page. That is, I just kind of scratched my head at that one. Like, how admit to me that you don't know what you're doing without telling me that you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. It was kind of like the way that came.
Middle point. Where is that middle section? It's impossible for anyone to decide that as well. And it's also interesting how people have reacted since, because there's been lots of content pruning, whether it's been a page at 301 somewhere, whether they've ended up 410ing it or just letting it 404. That must be happening in big ways, in the last 4 weeks. And even recently I saw on X Search Liaison mention, well, old content isn't necessarily unhelpful content. So, right. So, which is true, but now I'm thinking, well, are they saying that because they're now seeing a hell of a lot of old data that's just getting, no indexed for whatever reason or redirected elsewhere, and that isn't what people should necessarily be doing? But when you've got sites with thousands, tens of thousands of pages, how are you going to sift through that manually? It's going to be near impossible to do that. Well, not impossible, but it's just going to take too long, isn't it?
I mean, I would argue that if you had been writing good content all along, your content would not be unhelpful to start with. But there are so many websites and so many business models that are based around, I'm just going to spin up a whole bunch of content that's intended to rank and then sell my stuff or get those eyeballs.
Yeah.
That there is a lot of garbage out there that,
Plus,
that realistically should never have existed in the first place.
Yeah, and I think also, again, I think I said last month, this reminds me of the original Penguin Panda updates, and in the same way that people kind of knew before the algorithm update happened, they knew if they were doing really bad black hat link building, that maybe afterwards they kind of quietly admitted, oh, maybe I did go against the actual ethics of the algorithm, and I do deserve, this is karma, right? So maybe this is today's version of black hat content production karma happening for some site producers who always thought that their sites ranked well, but that's what they said. Oh, these are ranking well. Yeah, but is it helpful to the user?
Is it useful? Yeah. There was one more X post that I wanted to mention. It was an analysis by a Googler of a recipe page. And they said that the recipe page wasn't helpful because if you read it, there's a lot of paragraphs that repeat and a lot of information that repeats. And there's this tome of backstory before you get to the actual recipe. And this isn't really helpful to the user. To which I'm thinking, this is literally what your algorithm, Google, I'm speaking to you, has been training the recipe makers to do for years. And no one has liked it. The recipe makers don't like it. The people using the recipes don't like it. We don't like having to read an 8,000-page backstory of where you met your mother, and that's how you got the recipe for her chocolate chip cookies. Like, it's some of the things they say. I just bless their hearts. But let's move on before I get upset because I'm getting
get you on a panel with the Googler. When's this going to happen?
Who's on a panel with the Googler?
You. That's what I want you. Maybe that's a New Year's resolution you can do. A pre-New Year's resolution. Get on a panel with a Googler.
Do we really want to pick that fight? Do we want them to hate us? Because I will ask questions and then I'll get mad and then I'll ask more questions and it will not turn out well.
But yeah, that's helpful content. But yeah, we all have to make it, continue to make it.
Helpful content. And then Google also released a spam update. This came from the Google Search Central blog. So in addition to trying to weed out the unhelpful content, which we are not 100% sure they can differentiate, they're also looking to improve their spam detection and removal, hopefully across multiple languages, but we know that that's not always balanced. Targeting, cloaking, hacked sites. Okay, so targeting hacked sites is interesting to me because I see a lot of hacked sites, especially like hacked WordPress sites. People don't even realize they've been hacked because of some of these, some of the exploits really do hide. And unless you know what you're looking for, you won't discover it. So all of a sudden finding that you've been completely removed from the index would be a jarring wake-up call. Have you heard anything else about this?
Not specifically with hack sites, but it's a problem because they'll obviously know over time the way that those hack sites interact with a website, and that will become a pattern over time, which is something you would hope that they can then say, well, maybe they're a hack site, but they'll still have to check those sites and the legit content doesn't get through. So they are still getting penalized for being a victim of it. And it's hard because they're kind of because they usually come in through third-party plugins or bad copies of themes or any other kind of exploit, an old version of WordPress that's now exploited. The onus is on the site owner so much now and how are they going to know the ins and outs of all the code of every third-party plugin? It's no site owner knows that, unless they've got someone, a real experienced developer who knows their way around that specific CMS. But from a search engine's point of view, they always know it's going to be there. So they have to kind of like crime, isn't it? It's like web crime in a way, and pollution that they have to get rid of it.
Well, the moral of that story is really don't go installing every plugin that you see that, shines brightly and has flashy lights, because you don't know where it came from. You have to be judicious about the plugins that you have. You have to keep your WordPress instance up to date. You have to keep your plugins up to date. And plugins that have been abandoned or not updated for ages, you might want to consider taking those off, because no one's maintaining them anymore. I mean, there is a lot to be said for the security of keeping your website up to date with plugins and security patches. I also wonder, though, about the scraped content and the auto-generated content. I still don't think Google's great at detecting when something's been auto-generated. And I definitely think with scraped content now and all of the AI plugins, spinning existing content that you stole from someone else is going to be so much easier. And they cannot tell the difference. I mean, I know they say they can, but I think their false positive rate and the false negative rate is still extremely high, too high to be useful, in production. So there's they have a long road to hoe when it comes to getting spam under control. And I mean, it's probably a losing battle, but I know it's a battle they have to fight.
Well, if it's a losing battle, though, then what happens? Because if they do in fact lose it, then that's going to affect normal organic rankings, if you want to still call whatever they're going to be in 10, 20 years, if you want to think that long ahead. That information is going to be harder to identify. As the technology gets better, content's going to be harder to identify if it's been written by a robot or a human. And then do you have to disregard that the way in which they have recently by just saying, is it helpful? But then what's helpful? And all of these ways and then the way in which these people will be able to then spin that content in automated ways will make it harder to identify what is good, what's helpful, what's not. How do you rank that? There's going to be, do you have to have verification to publish?
Well, you'd almost have to have a list or some kind of whitelist of trusted, verified sources that you're getting information from, that Google would be getting information from to weed out the websites that are not writing their own data, not doing their own research. It's a complicated, I mean, that could be a webinar in itself.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking about the ways in which, say, use X as an example. Actually, the main platforms, they're now using verification so that you can wean out fake information or disinformation or bots. Makes it harder for abuse in general, which is interesting because even though people did moan and groan about it when it first happened, it does seem to actually be a viable business model, but it also does seem to be a way of verifying. Even though there's ways through that as well, is that going to be like the web? Do you have to be a verified person somehow? Well, actually, this site's connected to this credit card. This credit card does connect to this person. And actually, does that make schema all the more important in the future?
Schema, yeah, I imagine schema and some kind of verification. I mean, that's where this is going, I think.
Which is interesting because then people have to make business models on making these verified, people, which is going to make policing easier for the search engines. But the fact that we'll have to all kind of have to do that. You can't
hide anymore. Do you remember that old meme that nobody on the internet knows you're a goldfish?
Yeah. It's been around for ages.
Well, but now you're not going to be able to be a goldfish. Everyone's going to know who you are and be able to find out what you do as a person, because otherwise it's just too easy to lie. Yeah, but again, catfish still is airing right now, isn't it? You would have thought that when someone goes, "Oh, my webcam doesn't work," by now it's 2023. Danger, Will Robinson. Yeah. So right. What's other updates? Because there have been a lot. Yes. So there was a core update. Yeah. Do we know when that happened? It started on the 5th of October. Okay. Ended on the 19th. But there were a lot of updates. So there was
the original, well, not original, but there was an August core update. There was HCU in September. There was the spam update we've just talked about, which started only 24 to 48 hours earlier. That was a busy month, and there were a lot of things. And obviously, some people were thinking, is it one, you know, when you get multiple algorithm updates, so it makes it even harder to decipher which update may have had a problem, because especially with the HCU and some of the core, there was a little bit of overlap, and some hit, I know with HCU, some got hit at the beginning, some got hit at the end, just as another update was happening. So it was, it's very interesting to see how some reacted it. And again, it's harder to actually research into them. I know Systrix does a good example of doing winners and losers now and again from these updates.
It is kind of like an earthquake with aftershocks. You know, you don't know which one's going to make the house fall down.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, how much did you see a lot from this specific core update? That maybe
No,
it was.
I haven't. Not in the sites that I run. So I was maybe, you know, far enough away from the epicenter that I didn't feel it. But I think we're still. I assume I'm still doing research on the original. If there was additional damage done by any of the secondaries, I wasn't significant enough to make it on my radar.
Yeah. Well, at least it's done now. So whatever may have happened to anyone's sites is all.
No, we think it's done, but they've done stuff after Black Friday before. Like it's been years since they did it, but Google doesn't always respect the sanctity of the Christmas, that Christmas stretch between Thanksgiving and New Year's.
I think people just prepare for, isn't it around the 19th of December? It's not quite December, but, you know, just as everyone's starting to, especially in some agencies, right, who, you know, you do start to go, right, we're going to get a bit quieter at the second half of December unless we've got retail clients.
Right.
And then something happens, and it's a bit unfair, isn't it?
It's entirely unfair, and it's sneaky.
It is. And again, do you want to have that on the 2nd of Jan? Would you want to? What would you be, if they were listening to us right now? What would you say, like 16th of January, maybe? Just let everyone get back. Then
let everyone come back. All of your holiday parties are over. You know, the only thing the only holiday you've got to really sweat right now is Groundhog Day and Valentine's Day. So let's do it then. Then it's not a problem. During the holidays, though, you know, my mom is not going to understand if I have to leave Christmas dinner early to go deal with a core update that just destroyed everything.
No, they'll never care. They'll never care.
They don't understand.
But that was all the main core updates. But at least they've also done some AI updates, AI-based updates.
Yeah. So we've got this new robots directive that Google rolled out. This was again reported by Barry Schwartz, who is an invaluable resource to the community. The interesting thing about the Google extended directive, my understanding was that it doesn't really block as much as perhaps the Chat GPT block will block, and the Bing AI blocker does. It's just not, it feels almost performative, I guess is what I'm saying.
Like they had to do something.
Like we did it because everyone else is doing it, but it doesn't really do anything. It's like the button at the crosswalk. You can push it, it doesn't really do anything.
Oh, do you think it's a placebo? I do feel that sometimes. I think it's the opposite. There is one near my office that you press it and there's no way you're waiting less than 45 seconds, which in waiting to cross the road time is like 5 hours, isn't it?
Well, at least where I'm from, I've never seen a crosswalk button that actually did anything. But you know, with these robots, there were disclaimers and language in the article that, to me, if I'm going to dissect it as though it were being told to me by Bill Clinton, I would question the efficacy of the block. Like, okay, you could do this, but what's it really going to do?
Yeah. And it is very annoying. And you know that if they change something later, it doesn't matter because whatever they'll have collected in the meantime is probably worth their while. And that's going to be a bit annoying. And also you've got things like ChatGPT that are going up to being, in real time now, aren't they? Instead of being 18 months old in terms of information. So you're going to have to be even faster to not index something you don't want indexed, as though it's actually a consideration before you hit publish on anything. If you at that point are running on a site where it's selectively allowed or not. But it's interesting to see that at the moment it's just in robots where.
And the robots, what it's saying is it's not blocking anything from crawling the site and getting that information. It's them saying that they will take your direction and not use it in certain projects. They still have the information, and we're just trusting them not to use it in a way that we don't want them to use it, but we don't know how they want to use it, and they don't know how they want to use it. And there's a lot of blind trust being asked. And
it is weird, and it seems like it's an opt-out world it will come into. And even then, what are you opting out to? Because if you want to get seen in terms of visibility, you don't want it to become a point, well, actually you need AI to consider these things, or you're not coming in at all. Which
or
is
the search generative experience. You don't want to be excluded from a result that's being produced by BARD or being produced by the SGE because you said, oh, hey, you can't use my data for that. Even though Google knows your site's there and knows that your site has right information, your information isn't being factored into that answer because you've said, no, I'd rather you didn't.
Well, then it's not organic, right? At that point.
No.
And if you talk about the definition of the word organic, not the way in which we use it every day, like it's that's unnatural at that point, which would be interesting to see how they deal with that.
It's all very complicated.
I think that this is just the again, maybe a data experiment for them. Let's see how many people add this directive, see what happens, see how it affects the way in which it works on their own products, and then fine tune it later. But at least these options are here for everyone.
Yeah. Well, let's keep going so that we don't run out of time. The new recipe search interface, my understanding is that this is going to be image first, image primary kind of search, which is what this looks like. Really, it just means you have to be a lot more careful about which image you're putting forward as the first image in your recipe, which makes sense because you want people to see the finished product. So that all seems perfectly logical to me.
Yeah, I haven't seen this personally. I know it was it it's not like rolled out everywhere, has it? I don't know if you've been able to see.
It's probably rolling out in waves. I search for a lot of recipes, but I haven't seen this particular interface. But I do see a lot of images, and I do tend to click on the image in the carousel.
And images, when it comes to food, is really important because it can put you up reading the whole thing, But it's also a good way of knowing that it uses all of the schema easily, which makes it even more important when it comes to recipe schema to make sure that all of those attributes there, especially images. But yeah, I'm interested to see how they use it, and because obviously people are searching in that way, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, how does that affect what you said before about the way in which recipe producers are being told to write a certain way?
I feel like the recipe schema mitigates the damage that the 8,000 word essay on how you met your boyfriend above your recipe would push the recipe data so far down that it's difficult for the engines to grab and repurpose and repackage, which is essentially what they're doing here. I think that recipe schema is just, even before today, has been very valuable in taking the details and the important parts of the recipe, shoving that all up into the head of the document, and making sure that the browsers or the crawlers can get that instantly and not have to put on their hip waders and slog through your essay in order to get that recipe data that they want. So I don't know. I still question how they're going to justify in their heads changing all of the guidance that they've been giving to the recipe people about those stupid essays. I wish the essays would die. I don't like them. I don't read them. I skim through them anyway because I just want the recipe. So it would be great if we could get rid of that. I don't know if these changes are going to necessarily cause the demise of the 8,000 word essay.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Well, I see Brianne East mentions that they look at the rating over the image when it comes to recipes, which is interesting, right? Because I think of myself as a user of, well, I don't know who did those reviews, because something like that is very subjective, right?
Yeah.
But I should say, I know my end result won't look like theirs, so it doesn't matter. Which I guess is also a really good point. If you have a sexy enough photo, and the one thing that can be made sexy in imagery is food, that's not to say that it'll actually look like that at the end. We've all been fooled by McDonald's advertising.
There's things that you can do to dress up some of your items, and there's things you can do, but we'll save that for the Q&A because I'm getting the panicked look from the wings. Let's keep rolling. The SGE can now generate images and write drafts, which means we're all going to be replaced by robots tomorrow.
Yes, can't wait. I mean, I haven't tried it myself, and I can see how Gopher's making a barbecue in the woods is going, a great evolution.
That's a capybara, thank you.
Oh, sorry. See, this is the stuff I'd live in a city. I don't know.
They're in Australia or Brazil or something. I don't know. They're nowhere by me.
Is it useful? How useful is this to the future of the way in which we do things? Is it actually useful, or is it a nice thing to have that we experiment with?
I think it's a nice thing to have that we experiment with. The generating images, I don't. If the only images you ever use are just randomly illustrative of your topic and don't actually convey any additional information, I wish we would stop including them. I know we're a very image heavy organism where we like that visual stuff, but it slows the page down, not necessarily all the time, but it can. And it's not helpful to telling the story. Like if your article is meant to impart information about a product, I want to see the product. If it's meant to tell me how to put the product together, I want to see pictures that tell me how to put the product together. If it's a news article, I want to see a picture of the person or the people or the news event. I don't want to see a computer generated picture of a capybara making bacon.
Exactly. Let's see what they do with it. Let's see what they do. What's next thing? Search results. Back to search results.
Google's not going to be doing the indented results anymore.
No. I personally find them quite helpful, but I'd like to see where they go with it and the way that they've got rid of FAQ. Let's see what they do. But again, guys, that's still not to say that this isn't some kind of play to say that you should do anything differently in your day-to-day SEO life. So just the way
it's interesting to know, but I don't think it's going to overall affect what we're doing.
No. But if you've lost them, don't worry. It's not you, it's them.
The Google tests a news-filled homepage.
Yeah, I like
it. Do you? I don't look at it.
I don't know. I read a few because I know it knows my personal habits, but to me, it's very repetitive. There's only so much I can read about Rick and Morty next week.
I know that it's like tracking me all over the place, and because of some of the Reddit groups I read, it shows me a lot of information about things I wish I would not be reminded that I read so much, like that Meghan Markle hate group that I'm in. It's just it's a lot of Sussex information that I really didn't want to know. Yeah, I understand that they're trying to be more like Yahoo maybe, but Yahoo serves a different audience, and should Google be like Yahoo? Do we need another Yahoo, or should Google just be Google? That's
I know what you mean. Let's see what they do with it. I don't know if that's what the Google News is for, if they want to get the news right, or let's see.
I mean, I could see that the sites that do get mentioned there are probably going to see a significant bump in traffic, but the joy and the excitement over that bump in traffic is going to lessen over time. There will be initial joy, and then there will be, okay, well, cool. Oh, well. So it's not a long-term thing. It's a fun bell and
No.
whistle for it now.
Yeah.
Oops. Google Rich Results is now supporting paywalled content.
Good. Maybe.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it's
mean,
good.
I don't have a problem with it, but I personally hate paywalls. So
Yeah, I do. So are they enticing the paywall publishers? Oh, well, we will let you, crawl certain stuff. So it entices it, therefore gets in the index, makes you go to it, which again is a bit, I don't know, weird move for them to do, but it's nice that they've at least split it out, right?
I imagine there's a lot of newspapers and media companies that had a hand in lobbying for this change. And I think it could be a polarizing move. I think it's going to remind people how much they hate paywalls, and we'll have to see what happens there. But this is nice for the media companies that have paywalled content, but I don't think it's going to be enough to save their business models, because their business models need to be revamped. And this is not this is a sticking plaster on a jugular slice.
Yeah, the bigger they are, the bigger the rebellion against it. There are, I mean, I won't mention the names of sites, but there are sites out there that you just enter URLs and it removes said paywall in different ways, and that'll keep on happening, and those things will get more sophisticated and harder to stop. But again, good to see that at least it can be split in some other ways of structured data.
They've now gotten rid of the event-rich results. So much like the FAQs and how-tos, they're now not doing the event snippets. Probably good, because I've seen that abused too. A lot of these things that are getting removed, I saw them abused so hard, and it was this just proves to me that we can't have nice things because people abuse them until they get taken away.
Yeah, and it's happened over and over again. You're given something and then it is taken away, but it's it's hard to know which ones aren't going to be abused, and if they are, how often. Because I found
how long is it going to take? So I mean, people will ride the wave as long as they're making money.
Yeah, I mean, I did find it useful when they first came out, but then you just saw more and more spam essentially happen.
Yeah, and you're like, that's not really an event. Why are they doing that?
Exactly.
Like an event for a sale. Like, no one cares.
Yeah. So
all right, well, let's get into the AI stuff.
Yes.
So optimizing SEO for AI search engines. This was written by Roger Monti. This was in Search Engine Journal earlier this month. Obviously, this is a thing that everyone's going to have to start thinking about. I feel like most people have been, if you're doing good SEO and you're doing good development, you've been doing this sort of all along, and you don't have to adjust what you're doing too much. Have you seen anything that would require additional modifications?
No, only the way in which you have to be more considerate to the fact that things have to be more optimized to a human. Like it's going back, not back to basics, but I remember at the very beginning of doing SEO and trying to train other people of writing SEO, of just for a second, just forget that there is a search engine in the equation and write for the audience. And it hasn't really changed in the same way that all guidance and requirements are all the same, but they've just been kind of formalized and evolved over time to be more specific. Like EEAT, right, was just a bit of webmaster guidelines, probably a couple of paragraphs, and now there's a whole portal around it.
Yeah, I think that the clear HTML tagging is an important thing to, not for SEOs to remember necessarily, but for SEOs to remind developers about, because I see a lot of poor choices or questionable choices in terms of HTML tagging that aren't visible to the user and don't really change the way the user sees the information. It's probably just easier for the developer to do it, but it does have an adverse effect on how Google, or I shouldn't keep saying just Google, how the crawlers understand the presentation of the data, because the presentation of the data and the information creates a hierarchy and it paints a picture. And if you use the wrong color paint, okay, that's also a bad choice. You know what I mean, though. I'm struggling with my analogies. I'm running out. Point is, good HTML tagging, good HTML structure, validating structure has always been and will continue to be very important for everyone.
Which kind of goes back again to schema and any kind of structured data. So weird that it kind of always does come back to that original knowledge graph, isn't it?
Well, and fundamentals. You have to have solid fundamentals. Otherwise, you're frosting a styrofoam cake. So transforming search with AI. RAG is the future. I almost said RAG, but it's Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's a technique that's refining responses by collecting relevant data. This was written by Michael King. This is a long read. This was in Search Engine Land. It came out, I think, just a week or two ago, maybe just a week. If you get a chance, everybody in the audience, please go read this. It's a long read, but it's very in-depth, very well researched. I think this is going to be kind of one of the defining articles for the year. This is an important concept to understand. Basically, he goes through helping you understand how SGE works, the search generative experience, and by having that understanding, you will then be better able to present your content in a way that helps that along rather than hinders it.
Yeah. I've also, just for everyone's information, I've just put the link in to the post that we're talking about now in here. It's very long, but it's also really interesting. And again, does it change the way you would think about your approach to things by the end of it? That's something that I think would be really interesting for 2024. People's strategies now that people are coming up with for next year, where they have to adapt to all of these updates, and the way in which AI is changing the way that people search, let alone the way people publish. It's one of those things that I didn't think when AI came out, I didn't think it would really, because you read about it. I'm not talking the early parts where it's been out. We know it's been out for years in different ways, but the way in which it's been more publicly out there, let's just say since ChatGPT became famous, I didn't think at that point, oh, well, is that going to change the way in which I should think as an SEO, or a client should, in the way that they publish any kind of content, or even think about getting discovered on a search engine. I didn't think about any of those things at the beginning. I just thought, oh, this is quite cool. It gives you information in a nice way, very fast. It's very elegant. All the technology is great. I just didn't think about, oh, actually, that might change everything in the way that we do our jobs. Interesting.
Definitely. I think you'll be smarter. You'll feel smarter having read that article. Generative AI enhanced version of Google Assistant has also been announced. So it's Google Assistant with Bard. And in theory, it's going to help you. It's like a virtual assistant, but we've had things like this before. Like Bing had that thing that was supposed to help you, and hopefully the technology is improved. I feel like maybe originally this was the Mac notebook, where you or Newton, is that what it was called? And it was cool and you could write on it, but it didn't go anywhere. But then later on, when the tablets came out and the iPads and the iPhones, suddenly it was miraculous. So hopefully technology is progressing to make those virtual assistants more functional and slightly more helpful than they were before.
Yeah, because even though the technology is there with stuff like, I remember Trello when it first came out, and they had some connections and you could have different connector APIs, and someone invented a thing where they got, the barcode scanner, and they put it next to the fridge. And then when they were out of something, they scanned it. It then added itself as an item into Trello for them to buy again. Like that, I thought was clever then, but that's still human intervention then. Now AI, I'm thinking, well, you should know how long it takes me to go through that item and then automatically add it. Maybe if I want it next time, maybe I don't want tuna twice this month. Like that's, but then I may need it if I'm thinking about making something with tuna in it, which it would know about.
Now, I know my phone asked me this morning if I would like to go to Starbucks and if I would like my usual order, and it offered to place the order for me, which I found creepy and confusing. So I said no. But yeah, they're making a lot of progress with everything. Why don't we move on to WordPress news and then try to blow through this quickly, because we've got like 6 minutes left. Changes to attachment pages. That was announced. The attachment pages are now disabled by default. This is something that we've been at Yoast have been recommending that you do for a very long time, but now it is part of the WordPress core because we were so prescient and so smart. We were trying to do something that was ultimately good for you anyway. So we're very happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, nothing even much to elaborate on it even. I mean, it's just going to help a lot of sites and crawl budgets, which on scale of WordPress is going to have quite a huge indents, isn't it? You know.
Yeah. WordPress 6.4 also supposedly has significant performance improvements. So I have not personally experienced the significant performance improvements yet, but I've got other things that I'm working through. If you're using something like plugins, different plugins can drag that down. But I am hopeful that this is going to be something that will make people less whiny about how slow WordPress sites are.
Yeah, but yeah, and it's really good that they're doing all of these improvements. I've seen some in some of the sites that we've worked with. But again, there's so many variables, right? You know, I might just, the CDN might have just been a little bit further that time, or something might have been purged. But all of these little things do help, even if it's like code saving time in kilobytes. And again, that footprint on scale is bigger than we think.
Yep. Oh, that was it. So Yoast news. We have released, we're blocking unwanted AI bots from your site. This is a new function that we've added. Some of it is available in free. It looks like the other 3 are available only for the premium users, but that was released today, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah, if not in the last few days. But yeah, we were working on it when we were chatting about it earlier about some of the directives. So some of that's in there already. Definitely wanted to get that out there on sites. Some people have even requested it, you know, before we put it in, going, is it going to, we were already, wasn't even on our roadmap. It just went Q-skip straight up there because we know how important it is to some of our users. But yeah, it's really good.
Edwin wrote a great article on should you block AI bots or should you not? That is in our blog. So I don't have a slide for that, but if you go to the Yoast blog, we have some guidance on how you should make that decision, because it is a decision that needs to be made and it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So let's keep going. If you have a shop, because I think we're about done, if you are still working on your Black Friday stuff, we have a Black Friday preparation checklist. It's at, so I trust you can see that. It's great if you do have a web shop, and it will help you along with all sorts of things. I see that Taco has come back.
Yes, I did. So the button at the bottom right now also takes you to the checklist, so that makes it easy. All you have to do is clicky, clicky, clicky.
Yes.
And then it gets you there. I think we have one more slide left, isn't there, Carolyn? Yeah, the next one, because then we'll go to the Q&A. Because as you probably know by now, we're doing this every month. However, something's changing, and it's not due to black magic, but we've renamed our monthly webinars. So next month, you'll be looking out for the SEO update by Yoast.
Yay!
Yes.
New name, same faces. Well, same Tuesday. Well, new Tuesday, but November 21st on Tuesday, 4 p.m. Central European time. Alex and Carolyn will be there, and I'll probably show my face a little bit again as well.
Good. I'll be at Yoast HQ on the next one as well, which will be cool.
That's going to be fun.
Yes.
All right. So I know that we've come up to the full hour, but there are a few questions from people. So we'll take just a few more minutes to answer some of them. And the first one is the most upvoted one by Amanda. And Amanda asked, is there something we can do if we found our data scraped, and posted on another site?
What can you do? Well, there's a few things, aren't there?
You used to be able to file a DCMA report with Google to try to get that site, at least that content, make that content not rank. I mean, you could always resort to violence if you know who it is, but I wouldn't recommend that. Oh, did I say that out loud? Anyway, the DCMA is probably the only thing that you can reasonably legally do legally. There's no way really to stop someone from scraping your site if they are determined to scrape your site. You can make it less enticing or less appetizing for them to scrape your site, or you can accept that it's going to happen, and you can provide them with RSS feeds and embed links back to your own content in those feeds, which is what I do with a lot of my news sites, because those sites are going to get scraped. It's going to happen. So I provide an full RSS feed, and I have links peppered into the full content that go back to other articles on our site. So if they're going to scrape my content, I'm going to use them to build backlinks.
Yeah. And that submission also sets automation in place, right? So it'll say, well, this is your site, this is their site. And obviously, not the algorithm, but the system will be able to know, well, actually, you did publish that content first and they did not. And therefore makes you the citation, if you want to call it that. And, you know, even it can even help penalize that other site, because if they keep doing it, they'll just take that whole domain out and make it much, much harder for
if there are enough bad reports filed on them, they will, you know, Google will take them out. So if they're notorious and open about it, just file a bunch of complaints. The trick with the complaints is you have to be authorized for that domain to make the complaint on behalf of your own domain. So if there are other sites that are getting scraped, reach out to those other webmasters and say, hey, you go file a complaint too, and we'll all file complaints and we'll get this guy taken out.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to skip a few questions and then go through the one from Jeffrey van Dam, who asked, when do you think Apple will have this, which is the search engine, online? It seems like a long-term plan. Is there any magic you can work today to come up with a prediction?
It sounds like they're working on it, but I don't think they have plans to implement it, or they're not going to announce it because of the whole Google and $18 billion a year.
All right.
Yeah, they're going to take a long, hard look at what they want to do next. But for what we want to do, no, nothing should change. But if they're going to do something, it's not going to be for a good couple of years at least. Did you even hear anything about it? I don't think, because it would be huge. It would be, if they're going to do it, they're gonna really go hard on it, I think.
Right.
Guns blazing.
So, not right now.
not right.
Sure.
Not on the horizon. I would say that.
All right. I know there's a few more questions in the Q&A. Unfortunately, we have to end for today. So thank you so much for joining us on this Halloween. You may have noticed that we kind of dressed up for the occasion. We're not doing that every month, but this was just too good a chance to pass on. So see you next month. New name, same location, yoast.com/webinar, and we'll see you there. Have a good one.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.